I think that there are two things going on. Again, I kind of come back to the fact that I focus on communications, and that is, first, I think that America doesn't fully understand what bankruptcy means. To KT's point, bankruptcy means that you reorganize and the laws change and you have certain flexibility to renegotiate contracts. We as consumers do business with bankrupt companies all of the time and never know that we're doing business with bankrupt companies. We have no idea. The airlines are routinely in bankruptcy. I think that we have taken this word and turned it into a much bigger deal than it actually is. And that what would happen if the industry went into bankruptcy, but the message was that it's a restructuring process and the industry is going to come out, that it wouldn't change consumer behavior any more than consumer behavior has already been changed. And the other thing is bailout. I mean, a lot of people have talked about the fact that bailout is such a terrible word, but I think we have to understand what it is that we mean by a bailout. There are the old school bailouts that were more like giving money without any expectation of a return on that investment. These are, if we do them intelligently, hopefully going to be investments that we recover our money and maybe even more on. And if the question is whether the U.S. should make a smart investment in a viable automotive industry for the future, I think there are a lot more people who would say yes than whether they think that we should throw good money after bad for an automotive industry that's destined to fail, no matter, because they haven't made the changes that they need to make.
Boy, you're absolutely right. The word bankruptcy and the word bailout have sunk this whole thing. If they'd only come up, they'd only talked to you beforehand and gotten some better words.
I mean, I think that's right. I think it's a very unsympathetic industry is the real problem. The executives they didn't look good 2 weeks ago. We'll see how they look today. But it's an industry that's well known for failing to respond, and I think a lot of it goes to the horrific way that they lobbied against complying with fuel efficiency standards and things that and I think both parties are somewhat implicated, but I'll certainly include my own, the Democrats, because Michigan's had Congressman Dingell for many years, protecting the auto industry to death and getting them to have short-term victories that in the long run hamper the industry. But I just worry about this Russian roulette. That's the only reason I'm not sympathetic to the industry. I am concerned, I think, as the ambassador is, and I think all of us should be to some extent, as to what it's going to do. If it's repackaged differently, if it's packaged as a reorganization, I think that maybe the psychology of that will be different. It's one thing to fly on a bankrupt airline or buy from a bankrupt chain store at the mall, because you may not have the worry that company needs to stay in business in order to continue to service your car, honor its warranties, be able to produce the parts that will be needed when it's replaced. Buying a car from a bankrupt car company, I think, even though it's true, I think that's right about GM in the 60s.
But Peter, the free market would jump in and say, okay, well, people are worried about a warranty that they might get from Ford or GM. This XYZ insurance company will come up with a program to insure against that. So there would be companies in the free market that would either start up or would get into those lines of business.
Can I just say that all this talk, and we've been talking about this for 2-3 weeks now. All this talk is for naught if the House doesn't have the votes. Yeah. And Mike said it earlier, the politics of this is fascinating. I mean, the House is sort of the front line of American communications, for lack of a better word. I mean, you're taught from a very early age, right? If you got a problem, call your congressman. I mean, we're getting calls in our office. My boss is a state senator over the bailout. We're like, we don't have anything to do with it.
Right. But I think people want to call and vent to someone.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Some elected official. So.
Exactly. But if they don't have the vote, then, what's going to happen? I mean, Obama doesn't take office till January 20th. So what happens in the interim?
And these companies say that they need money right away. Well, we'll get back to this subject a little bit later if we have any more information for you guys. But another important thing going on today is the Treasury Department may be reconfiguring its entire economic recovery plan and trying to encourage Fannie and Freddie basically to lower mortgage rates to 4.5%. The prevailing rate, my mortgage rate, for example, is 5.5%. This would be not to assist people in refinancing their homes, but rather it would be to help people buy homes for the first time. or people who just are renting right now and are interested in buying a home. The idea is to try to turn around the housing market. So the question is, if people are able to get an interest rate of 4.5% for a 30-year fixed mortgage, is that going to help turn around the housing market? You're smiling.
I'm listening. I wish I knew the answer. I'm sure Mr. Polson and the rest of them would like to know for sure, too. My guess is that by itself, that's not going to do it. You're going to need a package of measures to reignite some degree of confidence in the housing industry. New to market home buyers must be a smaller fragment of the entire market, and certainly not the most troubled. And if you look at the financing industry, not the most risk prone. So my guess is that it's a good start. It's one of the elements, but more is going to have to come.
You know, one problem with this that some critics are pointing out, and this is a very fluid program. It's nothing that's been formally announced. It's something that leaked out that the Treasury is apparently working on. But it wouldn't do anything to help the foreclosure situation.
That's right.
Well,
which the chairwoman of the FDIC is constantly saying we need to do a lot more to help the millions of people across the country whose homes are in foreclosure.
And not only because we need to help them, but when homes foreclose, it basically puts more inventory on the market. The market. I agree with the ambassador. I think the problems are multiple. I think part of the problems have not been that interest rates are too high, although that could help if they're lowered, but that people can't get. You know, that credit is tightened up. And from what I've heard about this proposal today, it's going to stay tightened up because, as they should, they're going to make sure that the people demonstrate their income, that the loans are being made only to people who'll be able to afford to pay them back. So there'll be, a certain stringency as to who can get these loans at these lower rates. And when you combine that with the foreclosures, you're going to still see a steady downward pressure on prices, I'm afraid, because there's just too much inventory on the market and too few people to buy it. And that's not necessarily going to be completely addressed by this proposal, or if it is, I don't see how.
Anybody else? What are you hearing when you do polling on housing, on foreclosures? What are people saying to you?
Well, I think that there are a lot of people who are worried about continued drops in home prices, and so they're sitting on the sidelines. They're waiting for some sign that home prices are going to stabilize.
Right.
And I think, to the extent that this says that people are willing to get back in the market and that maybe they see a bottom and that we get some good news in the marketplace, at least in specific markets that have either taken a particular beating in terms of home prices or haven't taken a beating but can show to the marketplace that there is some floor into where prices are. I think it will start getting people back in the market. I mean, I think really what we need, and it all goes to psychology, is this shift in psychology. And the way that that's going to happen is there are going to be pieces of good news from different areas of the economy, hopefully focused around home buying. And if we start getting enough of those positive news stories, it will create a snowball effect. Right now, the snowball effect is all negative. So I think that in some ways every little bit helps. I don't know that this isn't a cure, but it could be part of a solution.
It seems like if you could get a mortgage and you could, if you could afford it, it would be a good time to buy now. I mean, prices, there are bargains out there for sure.
But if you suspect that mortgage rates are going to go down,
like
what we're talking about today, you're going to
Right.
wait. You're going to hold off and wait to see what happens. So I guess the headline here is don't run out and buy something today necessarily, but you might want to wait a little bit longer.